Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have Matt Chang, CEO of Chang Robotics, Brittain Ladd, Supply Chain Consultant, and Garyn Angel, founder of FarmEd. They join us to discuss solutions that automation and AI can bring to the supply chain, certainly an important topic. It is great to have all of you with us, and let's go around the horn here just to understand where each one of you sits within the supply chain ecosystem. Matt, tell us more about Chang Robotics.
We implement robotic systems with the workforce, and we do it wherever you have a density of employees that are manually doing things. Our kind of bread and butter is the manufacturing sector, but we serve multiple other segments of the economy as well.
Right. And Brittain, your background?
So I'm primarily all things supply chain and robotics. I fit mostly with things related to retailers. So for example, Amazon's announcement today that they're going to open up automated micro-fulfillment centers inside a store. I work across that area, but I do the transportation, the inventory optimization, the network optimization, and so forth. And I work across multiple industries as well.
Right. And Garyn, tell us about FarmEd.
Yeah, we install AI robotics into classrooms, laboratories, universities, work with the USDA on growing the best food and the best practices, and then scaling that out to the farms and fields for nutrient density and maximizing crops.
Let's talk about some of the trends and news that are influencing the supply chain, particularly in the areas that you focus on. And of course, Matthew, with Chang Robotics, you're a futurist type of organization. So automation is robotics is something that is important for the company. Explain to us how that works when you think about robotics within the supply chain.
Yeah, the number one place we look to deploy robotics is to augment the human workforce. We have a lot of stress on the workforce right now, and then we're moving more things in the economy than we ever have before. We're also dealing with the reshoring of manufacturing to America from overseas. And so when you combine all those, it puts a lot of stress on the workforce. And so we're looking to deploy robotic systems that help the workforce accomplish more.
Right. And of course, Brittain, you had mentioned automation before. When you think of automation, Amazon is one of the first companies that come to mind. And now you see Walmart investing heavily in automation. What do you see as next for them? What are some of the trends influencing these decisions?
Well, it's really interesting what Walmart is doing. And the thing that Walmart actually does well is that they bring multiple applications together. So they use software from a company called 345 Global. The founder is also the CEO, Mark Edwards. And they use software from a company called Wiliot. And what they're doing with these two software systems is, number one, within the supply chain, they want to make sure they have better inventory optimization and visibility, and they want more product at the shelf. And once they know the product is at the shelf in the back rooms of their stores, their goal is to fulfill at least 30% of all online orders from their stores. And the way they're going to do that is by installing these robotic systems, these automated fulfillment systems. And they're actually going to be able to fulfill orders 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what's going to happen is that customers can come pick it up at a pickup window. They can have it just simply stored there. They can have it where they drive up and pick it up during normal working hours. But what Walmart is planning to do is really going to be transformative. And frankly, it's going to be very revolutionary. So Walmart, I think you have to look at and say, well, when they combine the fact that they're using 345 Global software and Wiliot's software was recognized by Time Magazine as one of the best inventions in 2023. And so Walmart is really managing everything across the supply chain, plus they're integrating a robotic system with it. And that's really going to help Walmart do some just incredible things related to automation. And I think, frankly, it's going to put Walmart in the lead across all retailers who are leveraging automation.
Right. And Garyn, when you talk about AI and you're working with different government agencies and different schools and so forth, is it in relation to sourcing for the supply chain, or is it actually for the production of what's within the supply chain?
Yeah, it's for improving the food within our ecosystem. We use multimodality technology. The majority of AI that people think about is simply labeling. We combine text with visual aids to monitor and constantly improve the grow recipes and our global food supply chain. And really, when you look at healthcare and wellness, longevity, and the cost of feeding people, it's all tied towards that nutrient density. So how can you maximize the nutrient density of your food? And it's through multimodality AI.
Does it change I guess, the chemistry of the foods? Is it still considered natural?
Oh, of course. We're growing natural foods. We're just meticulously monitoring the food and recording all of that data, both the binary data, the ones and zeros of how much water the plant's drinking, but also the visual data of how the plant's expressing. What is that specimen showing? And when you look at a plant and it's going to turn yellow or brown, for example, that's a pixel cluster. And we can recognize those pixel clusters with high definition much earlier than you can with the human eye. So we can adjust that environment and that grow recipe, the nutrients in real time to make sure that we grow plants to their full genetic potential.
Let's talk about some of the challenges associated with supply chain, because that, of course, was a big narrative during the COVID-19 pandemic, where there were severe disruptions. And even if we look at, what happened in the Port of Baltimore more recently, or some supply disruptions that we've seen in the Middle East, what are some of the challenges associated with that? And can these types of technologies help to mitigate that? Brittain, if you could fill us in there.
To an extent, the technologies can. Really, the main thing when you have a supply disruption, it's really going to depend what it is. The bridge collapsing in Baltimore, that's an immediate, unplanned, nobody was going to happen event. And so when something like that occurs, what these companies are able to do is leverage these platforms. And the platforms look out there at all of the ocean schedules, all of the available ports, and immediately they start looking at what ships were inbound, say, to the Port of Baltimore. And those ships are then diverted to Miami, New York, or some other port like that. And so the beauty of supply chain visibility and supply chain resiliency is that when some type of a disruption occurs, these companies have an ability to have these systems say, all right, this is what the disruption is. And immediately it starts running all kinds of analysis. And it says, this is option 1, option 2, and option 3. We recommend that you go with option 2. As AI improves, this will all be done autonomously. Now, we're several years away from that, but these types of disruptions will be recognized faster, and then alternative routes and so forth will be assigned faster as well. It's really fascinating to watch as this is coming together.
Right. And Matthew.
Sorry, go ahead, Jill.
Actually, I had a question.
I'll say for the last 30 to 40 years, we've been on this aggressive offshoring schedule. And I think in a country like the US, where we're capable of making and producing everything here, this is also calling to action the idea that we need to have some local and domestic production, so that we don't have international conflict and disruptions to the supply chain interrupting our daily lives. We saw that so much during COVID, where basic things were running off the shelf, from necessities to children's medication. So that's the other thing we see, is that the ability to empower U.S. producers to make things here in the country also adds to the supply chain resiliency.
Mm-hmm. And Matthew, stay with me for a moment here, because some newer technologies such as EV have been introduced into the supply chain, and there's a recent announcement, a partnership with Kodiak Technologies. I'd like to hear more about, because you have to think about downtime as it relates to these newer technologies and the types of power that they need in order to be able to execute on the supply chain.
Yeah, that's right. You're referencing an announcement recently where Kodiak Technologies, Roush, and then my firm, Chang Robotics, partnered to develop new EV technology for governments. The amount of power these vehicles consume is enormous. One vehicle charge is equivalent to anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 houses connected to the grid instantaneously. So as we migrate to renewable and more environmentally friendly technologies such as EV, we have to create new power or free up existing power to make those charges. So what you see is a lot of technology around microgrid, energy storage. Garyn was talking about nutrient density. We also look at energy density in battery systems. How can we capture renewable energy when it's produced maybe during the day or during wind events, and then use it during other times? So that's the idea of a microgrid, and really localizing power production so that we're not relying on mega power plants that take years and years to build, but we're capturing energy in the neighborhood where it's going to be used.
Yeah, because that's an important question that we've been covering as it relates to climate tech and EV and newer technologies that are being brought on. I mean, does a power grid have the ability to sustain all of these projects. And you need the infrastructure in place in order to be able to execute on these technologies that just evolve so much quicker. So Garyn, what are your thoughts on that?
I think AI is the new electricity. When you look at the disruptive form factor of electricity as it originally started to connect to houses, that's really what enabled the Industrial Revolution and allowed people to expand and the United States to become a superpower. When you look at AI, we are in that disruptive technology forum now, where as you connect this to houses, businesses, power plants, there is no limitation. It's granular insights for predictive decision making rather than reactive decision making. And you were alluding earlier to the disaster that happened recently with the bridge. Well, what are the port capacities and the rates at all of these? It's much more than just ERPs and CRMs plugging into a system now. It's really predicting what the business should do ahead of time with mass transit plugged into it. And everything in the world is electric. It runs on some form of energy. And we're in a time period where the cost of compute is heading towards zero, and the cost of electricity will soon head towards zero. So we're building the infrastructure to really make AI the most significant technological advancement that humankind has ever seen. From replacing factory workers with robots to growing the most nutritious food that humans can consume.
Yeah, and Brittain, it's interesting because virtually everyone who comes on to discuss AI, which is every industry at this point, has that same feeling that this is what the internet was in the late 90s. Like, this is the next iteration of how things are going to change the way that we live our lives. As it relates to the supply chain, what is this, 3 to 5 years, or is it too black and white to say it's going to be this start date and it's something that's dynamic and always going to be evolving?
No, it's already happened. So the supply chain actually is already leveraging some of these capabilities through AI. There are multiple software companies out there that have introduced platforms where it's truly leveraging legitimate AI. But what's going to happen is that this is going to be something that will continue to evolve. You'll see AI become specialized to conquer things such as inventory at the shelf, or a lot of transportation, inventory management. The things that Amazon is doing, where Amazon's looking at AI and saying, so how do we install automated micro-fulfillment centers? And instead of people fulfilling online grocery orders, we use a system from AutoStore or a company called Brightpick, and they're both AI-powered platforms, and we leverage their robotic system to fulfill all online orders, and it's basically all automated. This is the big thing Amazon's investing in. And so you're going to see where all across the supply chain, end to end, companies are going to be introducing things related to AI, different platforms, but it's something that will never stop. And the reason why I say that is because the supply chain is a living organism. The supply chain is something that has so many people working across it. It continues to evolve. So this is not a project or program. When we talk about AI in the supply chain, this is something that simply will never stop. It continues to evolve and will always be evolving.
Right. And Matthew, from the perspective of robotics.
That's from the perspective of robotics.
Yeah, so I'll help you out with that one, Brittain. So from the perspective of robotics, what you've had already for about 5 years is that AI has been embedded in robotics. You have this idea of AI vision. Garyn touched on that. Brittain talked about predictive decision making. So as robotics already have AI embedded both on board and in kind of the cloud level of computing and decision making, it's going to continue to accelerate. You have a bunch of hype right now around humanoid robotics and these smart robots that can work with people in a home setting or a retail setting. So you're just going to see that move faster and faster, and you're going to see a fusion, I think, of smart decision making on board the robot versus a remote control center where decisions are being made across an entire system.
And Garyn?
Yeah, I look at it like this. 1 billion seconds is nearly 32 years, and this decade is really about generative AI. So you'll be able to get 1 billion seconds, let's say, inside of 2 years with generative AI. So your process, your learning curve will be shortened 16x over the next 4 or 5 years. And as you run that out over and over again, what used to take many years of failure in the supply chain to figure out how to properly do just-in-time inventory, or when a supplier was having financial issues, you're now going to have that data set available to you with a suggestion at your fingertips from generative AI on demand. And people are not yet understanding how disruptive this actually is. And that's why I use that billion seconds and because we really look at it, and we're not living in 32 years right now. We're living in 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's
Jill, I'll
interesting.
tell you something that excites me about Garyn's space, where he's focused on food, is it's still true today that with all this advancement, we waste 50% of food. So from farm to fork, whether it be supply chain or harvesting inefficiency or post-consumer waste, we're still wasting 50%. So when we talk about, is there enough resources available, whether it's electricity or food, a lot of that has to do with, let's just recover more of what we're making. Let's stop wasting, and then there's going to be ample resources available.
Yeah, I mean, just it's so interesting, Garyn, when you put it in that perspective of the billion seconds analogy. I mean, even if you think about what this could look like 5 to 10 years from now, it's certainly going to be something different, right? Because as the technology evolves, I believe it's Moore's law, it just moves faster and faster with each iteration. So, I mean, our conversation could look completely different in, half a decade from now.
Without doubt, it's going to. And, we're the future of food production. As we start to move forward, it's really about localized food, and how do you get it to people as close and to the plant as possible. These conversations around food and supply chain, that 50% waste will be down to 10% waste over the next few years. The conversations around the dinner table will be much more advanced. You'll have people consistently talking about topics instead of people. And really, this is the basis for a happier society. And in my opinion, it all starts with the most nutritious and delicious food.
All right. Well, let's certainly hope so. Brittain, last words here.
So the way I would end this is saying we're really in an interesting period of time. And I've had the pleasure of working with Matthew over the years, and we've had really lots of discussions on this. And the thing that I love what Matthew talks about is and articulates so well is, this is how we're going to do it as a company. It's how we're going to be working with companies so they can leverage robotics. They can leverage software and AI and micro-fulfillment systems. The big challenge isn't the fact that we have AI out there and robotics out there. The challenge is finding a resource who can actually help you figure out, so what do you do with it? How do you leverage it? How do you install it? And in my role as a consultant, the thing I continually run into is companies say, we have an interest in this, Brittain, but we don't know how to do it. And that's why I'm constantly saying, well, you should talk to Matthew Chang. You should really turn to his company. And I are other people that I work with out there as well. But this is one of those situations where we have tremendous amounts of capability out there related to technology, but you still have to execute. And so unfortunately, what we're going to see and continue to see is a lot of companies talk about this, and they're not going to be able to do anything with it because they don't have the required resources on site, and they don't have the expertise. And that's why I say to all companies, when in doubt, reach out to someone who can really help you with all of this.
All right. And we will leave it on that good advice, gentlemen. Appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.
Thank you.